The F1 Focus Podcast with MV Welman and Hendrik Verrwoerd.
Welcome back to Formula One Focus. Hendrik Verrwoerd, my friend, is back to discuss the shocking demotion of Liam Lawson. Shocking in the sense that it actually happened. We predicted it. But the fallout from that's not going to go away very quickly. So welcome back, Hendrik. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's not repeat everything that we said last week. I am still pissed.
That's that in a nutshell. I like that. Yeah, it's not the what so much as the how, but I suppose let's talk about the what firstly. Do you think, we discussed it briefly last week, but do you honestly think it was fair on Lawson to give him two races 7 days apart from each other, and and then never give him a car to practice with because the car was permanently broken down basically, and then they just ruthlessly demote him? Number one, was it fair? Is it the right thing to do?
Well, no. I mean, obviously it wasn't fair to give him virtually no opportunity to get to know the car and then to penalize him because of that. On the other hand, one also has to say that he was in a very, very steep downhill spiral, and that he would probably not have been able to recover from it, even if they allowed him another 2 or 3 races. If they allowed him to try to find his feet in the car on a track that he knows at Suzuka this coming weekend, I'm not sure that he would have been able to bring himself out of that spiral. So, altogether, completely an unfair situation. The poor man was penalized because of that. If he bounces back now, and I think, one needs to look forward now. Let's not look back too much. If he bounces back at the Red Bulls team this weekend next to Isaac Adjar. Racing Bulls, I mean, these names. Then it would be an indication of his mental strength and his ability to find his self-confidence again, and probably be able to build it up, just like people like Albon did and Pierre Gasly did when they were demoted from the main team. So my hope sincerely for Liam, because he's a competent racing driver, he certainly belongs in Formula One, is that he takes this opportunity to recover and to build his self-confidence and to maybe lay a bit of a foundation for his future in Formula One. The same goes, I think, for Tsunoda this weekend. I think the pressure is on him. He didn't do himself any favors at all by stating publicly that he's aiming to try and finish on he's aiming for a podium this weekend. I mean, come on, that's a very, very steep goal to set yourself in the first opportunity that you get to drive what is arguably the most difficult car on the grid. It almost, reminds me of many, many years ago when BAR came in and formed the team when they took over from Tyrrell. And was it Craig? What's his name again? He was a team principal at that point, and he said, because Adrian Reinhardt had designed the car. He said Reinhardt had the reputation of winning their first race in any new category that they took part in. So he expects his team to win their first race. They were at Kyalami testing. I remember him saying that. History tells us that it never happened. And it took many, many years after that for that team to actually win a race. So, to come before, yes, it's his home race. Yes, it's a circuit that he knows very well. Yes, he's now in a front-running car. Arguably, we could talk about that. But for Tsunoda to say, look, I'm aiming for a podium this weekend, I think that's setting the expectations very, very high.
That's Craig Pollock, by the way, that you were referring to.
Craig Pollock,
there we go. Very interesting thing. Our thumbnail says, is the Red Bull the 10th fastest car, effectively then, the slowest car on the grid? And it's basically only Max Verstappen's genius that's pulling it up, kicking and screaming to the front of the grid. So the question is, the only way to test that really is, you mentioned to me before, is to see how the second driver does. And typically you would look at a team's second driver to see how the car is actually performing, taking out of the equation the talent of the lead driver, Michael Schumacher or Lewis Hamilton for that matter. So tell me about that side of it. Do you think Tsunoda is going to be shown up? He's been very confident. He says the simulator feels the car doesn't feel that difficult to drive. But Tsunoda, under pressure at his home race, first time he gets into the car physically, Honda spending millions to get him into that seat, white livery again, which I think, by the way, looks very, very nice. Do you honestly think Yuki will be able to deliver? I mean, no matter how good you are, this is a lot of pressure to be under.
First of all, that statement is Red Bull the 10th fastest team comes from a remark made by the pundit from ITV,
Bernie
from
Collins,
Sky Sports, from Bernie Collins. When she said in some interview somewhere, she said that if it weren't for Max Verstappen, that car would be the slowest on the grid, the 10th fastest on the grid. Which is a statement, that has profound consequences if it is true. I kind of understand where she comes from, because my argument has always been, people always say, many people have always said, yeah, but Michael Schumacher always had the best car, so that's why he always won. And same for Lewis Hamilton, he's always had the best car, so it's only the car that allows him to win. And I've always argued, no, you have to take into account the comparison between those superstars in the teams and their teammates in any given situation. And my argument has always been, the second driver, whether he's the official number 2 driver or not, but the de facto second driver, the Rubens Barrichellos of the world, even Nico Rosberg at some point for Lewis Hamilton. They are the normal drivers. They are not the once in a generation talents like a Max Verstappen is. So what you need to do to evaluate the competitiveness of the car is what a normal Formula One driver would be able to get out of that car. And then you have to come to some kind of a conclusion as to where that car really fits in the pecking order, because these once in a generation talents are all able to get more out of the car than almost anybody else. And yes, the car may have been designed more around them, but a Formula One driver is a very special person anyway. Anybody who's up to Formula One level, they can handle more or less anything thrown at them, except when you get to a situation like Red Bull and the RB21, it seems. But now we've got a very small data set for the current Red Bull car, the RB21. If you take that measurement or that standard that I've just mentioned, and you compare Max Verstappen with Liam Lawson, because we're talking about the RB21, this year's car, you cannot really come to any conclusion. We've only had 2 races, well, 3 races with a sprint in China as well. But you had a rookie driver who had not had the opportunity, as we mentioned, the opportunity to get into the car, to understand the car, to become, comfortable in the car. Max obviously has been in that generation of cars for a much longer time. So he's able to, apart from his genius, also able to get much more out of the car. So you can't really say that, I think, at that point. Because the first real opportunity that we will get to make that comparison with the second driver in that car will be this coming weekend in the Japanese Grand Prix. Tsunoda, as we know, is much more experienced. He did say that in the simulator he didn't find the car that hard to drive. But what do you expect him to say? Would he come out of that, wiping his brow and say, no, listen, this car is absolutely undrivable. Red Bull has made a mistake. I've made a mistake. I don't think it would be a good idea for me to drive this car. No, he would not say that. Obviously, he wouldn't say. And let's not also forget that Liam Lawson had a few opportunities in the simulator before the season started. And he always also said, no, this car is okay. I can, I'm impressed with the car, with its abilities. There's no problem in that regard. So, and look where it's got him. So the point I'm making is that let's maybe not come to the conclusion yet that the RB21 is the slowest car, apart from what Max Verstappen can get out of him. Let's see for the next 2. We've got 3 races coming up in 3 weekends. And on different circuits. So let's see what Yuki can do. Helmut Marko has already said he will stay with him. He will stay with him for the rest of the season. So let's see what Yuki can do, and then we can come to the kind of conclusion as to where the RB21 really is in terms of its competitiveness.
You just said, Helmut Marko said he will be given the chance until the end of the season. He said the same thing to Liam Lawson as well, but he signed the contract. So that old man is not to be trusted at all. And I honestly think that he's a dinosaur that doesn't belong in Formula One anymore. He runs his mouth. He's always involved in politics. What do you think? Do you think there's still a role for him to play?
I don't think one can fire somebody because they are unlikable, but you can fire somebody if they are incompetent. And I think that really, if you look at the record of the Red Bull junior team or the feeder the feeder program, really, which has been run by Helmut Marko for so many years now. If you look at the success rate there, how many drivers who entered the program, and I'm not talking about necessarily from go-kart level, but let's say from the single-seater level, let's say from Formula 3, even Formula 4 or similar, the first time that a young driver actually sits behind the wheel of a racing car, a single-seater. That's normally a Formula 4 level. If you take the number of drivers that have been in the Red Bull Junior program from that level onwards, and you take the number of drivers who eventually made it to the A team, which is the whole object of the exercise. If you take that number of drivers and you see how many of them actually became race winners, you'll see that it's only 2 out of that junior program that have ever won a race driving for the A team. We're talking, 20, 25 drivers or more, and only 2 of them really are race winners in the A team. So it's not a really impressive success rate, isn't it? From all of those drivers that came through that program, only 2 of them actually eventually won a race for the Red Bull for the A team, and that's of course Sebastian Vettel and Daniel Ricciardo. The other 2 race winners that they have had since did not come through that program, and that's Mark Webber and Sergio Perez. So that's not a very good success rate as far as the feeder program is concerned. There are other. You can also say how many of those drivers that ended up in the B team, whether they were called Toro Rosso or AlphaTauri or RB or now Red Racing Bulls, how many of them eventually ended up in the senior team and were dropped after a few races, after a while. In one case, in fact, you have a youngster called Jaime Alguersuari, who drove for the team from the junior team for a number of races, and he was then dropped, and he has dropped out of motorsport completely because of what that decision did to him mentally. So he's completely dropped out. He's a DJ now. So, that's the sort of price that some of these drivers are paying, and okay, that is not an objective reason to make somebody a scapegoat for that, but just objectively, the success rate. I'm sure there are a number of other statistics that one can also quote on this. But from a success rate point of view, Helmut Marko has not been successful in this program. Liam Lawson is the latest example of that. And I honestly think that Red Bull will do a good thing if they fire him. Not because he's unlikable, but because he's incompetent.
Oh, well, the fact that he's unlikable is a bonus. On that subject, we're talking about Marko, but then the moment you think about Marko and Horner and the Verstappen's father, you think about internal politics and stuff. And it's interesting that the news about Lawson's imminent demotion was broken in a Dutch newspaper. Clearly, there was some sort of a leak there, and that was Lawson had to find out the hard way through the media that he was being let go. I suppose he expected it, but I mean, that team is so much strife now. It's not getting any better.
Yes, although I do see a number of media outlets starting to speculate whether Max Verstappen will now be sort of thinking about leaving the Red Bull team because of the the unhappiness or the instability. Let's call it the instability inside the team. I don't doubt that there's instability. I don't doubt that there are still ripples of last year's happenings inside the team that are probably still being felt inside the team. It is known that Max was not happy about this decision to let Liam go. So will that feed into a complete unhappiness with the team? I think it's too early to jump to the kind of conclusion. I see even Juan Pablo Montoya is now coming. One should always be a little bit careful about what ex-drivers say. I don't really pay much attention to what they say because they normally don't have the full picture. They are not their makeup is not such. But anyway, to be an analyst. But anyway, so he's now said that, well, Max is probably going to leave Red Bull because he's going to get an offer that he cannot refuse from Aston Martin. So that's one of the stories that's doing the rounds. I don't put much weight behind what somebody like Montoya says about this sort of thing. But just thinking about it, why would Max leave a team where he can still win and where he can still win another championship, if not more? Yes, they're going to have different engines next year. They're going to have their own in-house engines. But he's always said that, this is Formula One is not his be-all and end-all. And he's shown that on many occasions that, he's got other interests. He's running his own sports car team. He's got, virtual racing that he's involved with. He's not married to Formula One in such a way that he would be willing to go to a different team and then go through the entire process again and building up that team around him. Because that's not going to, if he goes to Aston Martin next year, where is he going to go? Is he going to go next to Fernando Alonso? Absolutely not. I don't think that either of the two would relish that idea. Is Alonso going to retire and will he go next to Lance Stroll? Possibly, but then again, Max would have to be part of a years-long process to try and build up that team to get it competitive again. Max, Aston Martin is not going to be competitive next year. So why would he go through all of that? Where he's already achieved all the success that he has, 4 times world champion and multiple winner. Why would he want to do that if there are many other things that interests him, including taking part in the Le Mans race, for instance, and obviously running his own sports car race and maybe getting, world championship success there. That would be a challenging challenge, I think, for somebody like him. So I don't really buy into this whole narrative that we see these days that Max is unhappy and that he's bound to leave the team, by the end of the year. There might be performance clauses, and he might decide to exercise those clauses, but I don't buy that yet. I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but I'm not buying that yet.
Let's just talk about that a little bit. Max is, we remember the very first race that Max drove for Red Bull, he won. Spanish Grand Prix 2016. Same thing that happened here. Kvyat demoted after 4 races. Max moved up, and that's after Max was doing so well in the Toro Rosso of those days. He was not that Kvyat was bad in the Red Bull, it was Max was so good in the Toro Rosso, so it was basically the other way around. But the point is, he got in. He was basically in a leading car ever since then. And Mercedes was a bit more dominant. It was more dominant. Let's make no mistake. But ever since 2022, Red Bull was dominant. The question where I'm going with this is, I don't think Max will win the championship this year. I know it's early to say, but it's he's probably not the favorite. Let's call it that. Let's say he doesn't win the world championship this year. Moving to another team, and then with the new regulations, new engines, new chassis, everything is new. Adrian Newey is at Aston Martin, gets $1 billion or whatever they're offering, something ridiculous. Building something from scratch and sort of cementing your legacy. Don't you think you'd be interested in that? It's a matter of interest.
Possibly. I mean, I'm not close to Max at all in able to be able to read his mind. But all the indications that I can see from the outside, from a long distance away, doesn't seem to point to him being willing to spend another 5 years being initially in an uncompetitive car and then eventually getting to the point where he can win another championship. I just cannot see that. Yes, he's young. Yes, he's not even 30 years old. He's got a long career ahead of him, so he might well decide to go to a different team. That's why I'm saying I'm not buying it at this point. There might be factors coming in as the season progresses, even maybe next year or the year after, that could possibly change the whole situation. But at this point, I just cannot see it happening immediately. It could well happen in 2 or 3 years from now. I mean, again, he's got a long career, but that depends on what he wants to do with his life. I don't get the impression that he's like Fernando Alonso, who would like to race until he's 45, or even Lewis Hamilton, who would like to race, he's 40 already. So how long is he going to continue? I just don't see Max in the same, I don't think he's got the same frame of mind or the same outlook on his future than those two guys.
No, it does make sense. Just on the upcoming race, Japan. It's like you said in the beginning of the video. It's first of a triple header. It's Japan, Bahrain, and then Saudi Arabia. But the interesting thing is, you mentioned to me that basically the first sector of this circuit has now been resurfaced, and we saw what an influence it had in China, where the entire circuit was resurfaced on the tire graining and everything. What role is that going to play? We saw Lando struggling with graining on this specific new surface. What effect do you think it's going to have?
Well, let me first say that I was surprised that Pirelli was so surprised at the new surface at the Shanghai Grand Prix circuit last 10 days ago. That they were caught out. Normally, I would expect Pirelli to have sufficient data beforehand because they were supposed to get the kind of data from the track itself when they do the resurfacing to tell them what kind of asphalt they're using, what the graining is, that sort of thing, how rough it is or how smooth it is, that sort of stuff. And what and then Pirelli can make the calculations based on that, and then provide the three compounds that they have to provide based on that. So I was surprised that they were surprised. So I don't know whether they're going to be surprised again this weekend. As you correctly point out, there's a fairly large section, 1/3 of the entire lap. Is a new surface. I don't know whether it's the same kind of surface that we saw in China. But if you have one kind of surface, and this is I think it's from the end of the final chicane down the main straight into turn 1 and through the S's part of the circuit before they get to the Degener part. That's the first segment. If that surface is different from the second and the third 1/3 of the lap, then you've got a bit of a confusing situation because you will have different levels of grip, not only because of the surface, but also because of the nature of the corners in that specific sector. The nature of the corners in that specific sector is very fast. It's sweeping fast corners. Brilliant to see what a Formula One car can do. But what is that going to do in terms of graining? And I can't recall at this point. I should have maybe checked on that, but I can't recall at this point which three compounds they are bringing this weekend to Japan. But it could well be a decisive factor in terms of performance this weekend and which team will get it right, which car is more benevolent towards its rubber usage. And which ones isn't. It seemed that specifically the RB21, the one that Yuki will have to get so used to so quickly this weekend, was very hard on its medium compound tires last time out. But they did pretty well on their hard compound tires, which says to me that it has a lot of grip, aerodynamic and mechanical grip built into the car. So it would work. It's softer of the two compounds, harder than the harder compound, if you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, makes sense.
It didn't degrade as much on the harder compound of the two. So again, it depends on which one is it between C1 and C5, which three they're going to use this weekend. So that's one of the things that I think could well make a difference this weekend and could well have an effect, on the relative positions of the teams.
Okay, Japan's going to be the C1, C2, and C3, which is effectively one step softer even. So that's going to be interesting. If the Red Bull is that hard on its tires, on even softer tires with a new surface.
And we know that McLaren is probably better overall in terms of how hard they work their tires. I think Mercedes probably also. So which brings us neatly, I think, to one or two of the other themes for this current weekend.
Yeah, the first thing is the other teams. And let's talk about Mercedes. You mentioned them now. You mentioned them first, so I'll blame you. Kimi Antonelli, he got the driver of the day to his and everybody else's surprise, but
Yes. I don't know
he was very surprised to say. What do you think of his performance? He, of all the rookies, I think is probably, looking to be the best at the moment. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. No fuss, nothing around him. He was unlucky in China in the Grand Prix because he had floor damage, so his car didn't quite have the downforce and the performance that he would like it had, so he wasn't quite up there. It's only been 3 races. We always have to remember that sprint race in China is the 3rd race of the year. But now it's very early days. I keep on saying this. Let's not judge too early as to who's where. It's been an unremarkable start for Mercedes, both George and Kimi Antonelli, and I think that's exactly what they wanted. No fuss around them, good performance, solid point scoring by George so far, and Kimi was on the pace all the time. It just not quite worked out for him, but clearly there are no panic stations there. If we see the same kind of level of performance by Mercedes this weekend, they're going to be consistent this weekend, then they're going to be right up there in terms of competitors.
Now, the team that everybody's eyes were on last weekend after winning the sprint race, Lewis Hamilton's first pole position in a Ferrari and the first, even though it's a sprint race victory in Ferrari, to have both cars disqualified in a race for stuff that the team should have taken care of, I would imagine. And a lot of, strong words were used, some strong language must have been used in Italy this past week. Do you expect Ferrari to up their game? I see they're saying that they're expecting many more cars to be disqualified because of an underweight issue going forward. I wonder why that is.
That is interesting because I think, as we explained last week, these cars have to run so close to the edge of legality, purely because of how competitive the field is at the moment. They have to take the chances in terms of the fuel load that they run, in terms of the ride height that they run. And that's the point that Fred was here made, that, unfortunately for them, things didn't work out. And because of the long stint on the one set of tires, they didn't, the tires lost that extra kilogram. I'm not sure that was the entire reason for Leclerc being 1 kilogram underweight. And the same thing for Lewis being, being disqualified for the plank, or which way. Anyway, so they have to run these cars, and yes, if that's the case, in order to be competitive, you have to run that close to the edge of legality. It's quite possible that we will see a lot more disqualifications for that reason this year. Which is another jeopardy. I think, it's a pain in the butt for us who have to report on it, because 2 or 3 hours after the race, the results change, and then everything that you've put out before that then has to be updated again. But it's quite possible that we could see that. Absolutely, yes. But the point is, Ferrari didn't deliberately make any mistakes. They didn't try to cheat at all. This is just the way that things turn out. It's happened to other teams. It happened, to Pierre Gasly also last weekend, and on other occasions to people like George Russell, for the same sort of reasons. Teams do not cheat these days. They really cannot afford to try and get away with cheating. So if these sort of things happen, it's an error in judgment, or error in calculation possibly, or just circumstances that come together and lead to that sort of thing happening. So I will not be surprised if we see anything more than that. But yes, Ferrari will have to recover if they want to have any say in the title battle, in both title battles this year. They need to recover and have a strong weekend in at least 2 of the next 3 races to try and recover. So it's going to be vital for Ferrari to recover.
The self-same Juan Pablo Montoya that you referred to earlier is also, said some stuff about Lewis not being happy with the Ferrari at all. The way that it handles, he wants to be adjusted. Interesting remark.
That's why I say, don't take these guys too seriously. Ralf Schumacher is also, saying all kinds of things about various drivers and Montoya. The media outlets, and we are part of the media. But the media outlets like to speak to these guys because they say, and Jacques Villeneuve is another one. Because they say things that make people sit up and make people, that draws attention and in certain cases obviously draws clicks. So that's why they keep on getting quoted. But these guys don't know what they're talking about in terms of how would Juan Pablo Montoya know what it's like to get into a modern Formula One car, not much less a modern Ferrari Formula One car. How would he know what exactly needs to be done to adapt to that car? How would he know what it takes to adapt to a team that has a completely different culture to the one that you've just come from? As far as I recall, he never made that sort of jump. So and let's not forget that these are ex drivers who have been at the top level of their sport. They do not really want to give too much credit to the current top dogs. I think it's just in their nature. Why would you want to give credit to the youngsters of the day if you think that in my time it was much more difficult, in my time it was much more dangerous. Yeah. That sort of thing.
You have it easy, you don't know, yeah.
You don't have an idea. So Lewis is not happy because of this, because of that. And I think these guys also tend to read a lot of media outlets and media sources that may not be that credible.
Talking about McLaren, very early in the season, they're already starting to experience the problem of having two very, very good drivers very close to each other. We had Lando win in Australia and Oscar having to stay behind. It's the other way around in China, even though Lando wasn't really on the pace because of degradation, tire degradation. Jack Brown this week said basically you'll have to step out of the picture, or step out of the way and let them race. That's always been his approach. But I mean, that's an interesting problem to have this early in the season, don't you think?
It is, and I think we predicted it that they're going to have that. If you recall, my one of my predictions was that Oscar would become the champion this year.
Yeah.
And I think he's showing all the signs of being at least a serious contender. He doesn't have quite as much experience as Lando has, but he's giving him a good run. He was unlucky in Australia when he spun off in the wet. But and Piastri, of course, has now had his contract extended as well, so he's got no fears at all about his future at the team. The one thing I think that it's easy for Zach to say he's going to allow them to race if they are not in a situation whereby the one takes off points from the other. If both of them can get ahead in the drivers' championship far enough that it doesn't really matter if the one takes points off the other. Either of the two will become the champion. From a team's point of view, that's what they want. I suspect, however, that you're going to have a situation more often than not this season where they will not necessarily be 1-2 on the track. And that, they will have to fight their way to the front. And if they then, say, lie third and fourth and they fight each other and, the one, slows the other one down and that sort of thing, and you allow the opposition or the rival drivers to accumulate more points, and therefore your battle at the front of the drivers' championship. I have very little doubt that McLaren will take the constructors' championship. Yes, it is early days, but the early indications are like that. But the drivers' championship, if it's a 4-5-way battle for the drivers' championship, you have to, from a team's point of view, talking from a McLaren's point of view, you have to, at some point, and pretty early in the season, decide which is your number one to ensure that guy gets the maximum points in every race, that every opportunity where he can get the maximum points, whether it's second or third or fourth, as long as he beats the opposition and his teammate doesn't beat him. That's the way, and that's going to be the difficulty. That's going to be very, very difficult to manage.
Interesting thing what you're saying there. Because who do they choose now? Because apparently,
well, that's the point. I mean, what do you say? What do you say?
Lando is struggling more with this new McLaren MCL 39 than Oscar is. And the interesting that I noticed that Lando said he's never driven any other Formula One car than the McLaren. Whereas at least Oscar had some experience driving a couple of Alpines and lots of mileage in the Alpine when they were still getting him up to speed to go to Alpine before they blundered with that one.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing. I mean, if Lando is maybe faster, but he's not consistent, and Oscar is maybe not as fast, maybe he's as fast, but he's far more consistent and he doesn't struggle with the car, I'd love to see what they decide and whether Lando accepts that or not. Now, that's an interesting conundrum to have.
Yes. Yeah, and other teams have had it in the past. McLaren has had it many, many years ago with Senna and Prost. And obviously we remember more recently the Mercedes situation. So it depends on what the team management decides will be the deciding factor. Is it purely the guy who's ahead on points? Purely because you cannot wait until 3 or 4 races of the season to go to decide. Look, it's not possible. Until one of them is mathematically out of the championship. You cannot wait until then, because that's likely going to be again 2 or 3 races from the end of the season. That's going to be too late to decide the number one. So they will have to make a decision depending on not necessarily the point situation, but as you say, the individual driver's approach. How easy is he finding it? How likely is he to be the one that will end up ahead? And you have to then take those sort of unmeasurable measures or standards or metrics to decide. But that's the conundrum. That's an interesting and a nice conundrum to have for McLaren. That's their conundrum, and that's one of the themes I think we're going to see this year. One of the narratives. That's the word that people tend to use these days. One of the narratives of the season.
Just one last thing. My Jack Doohan Death Watch. Is he still in his seat? Funny thing, they're going to give his car this weekend to Rio Hirakawa in FP1 and not to Pierre Gasly, Wouldn't you have thought maybe give the car, give Doohan more chance to settle into the car, and maybe swap them around? Let Doohan give up his seat a little bit late in the season once he needs every opportunity to get used to this car. It's like everything is conspiring against him, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I don't know what their drivers' contracts say. It could well be that there's a stipulation in Doohan's contract that he will be the first one who will have to be replaced for a free practice one, because the team has to do it on 2 occasions during the course of the year. And maybe his contract, because he's the junior of the two, that he's the one that will have to give up his seat first for the free practice session that they have to do. So I don't know. Yes, objectively, if the team had a choice, that could well mean that that they don't take Jack's future in the team that seriously. It's a good opportunity this weekend to give one of their seats to a Japanese driver, who of course is a 2 times world champion in endurance racing, and a Le Mans winner. Hirakawa is a very, very competent driver. So
that's interesting.
So he's, and of course, being a Japanese driver at the Japanese Grand Prix, it makes a lot of sense to give a seat in the one practice session to a Japanese driver, and they have him. Let me just have a look. They have, apart from Rio, they of course have Franco Colapinto and Paul Aron. So if they had a choice, then they would put him in there. It makes sense from that point of view. I don't know whether Honda may have paid something. Honda is the owner of the Suzuka track. But it makes a lot of sense. But again, I don't have the kind of insights into his contract.
Interesting that you mentioned Honda, because I read after this race, after this Japanese Grand Prix, Hirakawa was going to be released to Haas, who sponsors Toyota Gazoo Racing, of course. There's a Toyota tie up there.
Yeah, I saw that as well. Obviously, he thinks that he might have a better future with a Japanese connection there. So,
sure. All right, Hendrik, that was an interesting discussion. Next week, we'll look back at the Japanese Grand Prix. We were smack bang in the middle of that triple header, like you said. Bahrain coming up, always one of the better races. And then Saudi is, of course, another street track, one of the most ridiculously fast circuits on the calendar, or in the calendar. So thanks for this. We're looking forward to talking next week.
I'm glad about one thing, and that is that we didn't give any attention to any of the April Fool's jokes that came out today. Recording this on the first.
No.
I don't know
whether so many jokes today, I'll tell you now.
Yeah, but have you seen any of the Formula One ones? So let's just say, for the record, the story that Monaco will be a night race next year is an April Fool's joke. Okay.
There you go. You heard it here first.
And the story that from next year on, with the new dispensations, the cars will be started with keys like a normal car. That's also an April Fool's joke. So let's just set the record straight. Do not believe that sort of story.
Just lastly, just very briefly, that the Red Bull looks good in white, that special livery, don't you think?
Oh yeah.
That's a very nice livery.
But I think the Haas one with the sakura, the cherry blossom design, I think that looks even better.
I'd like to see it. I wasn't that impressed with what I saw in the picture. Maybe see it on track. It may be better. Maybe better in real life. I'll see what it looks like. All right. Okay, Hendrik, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
The F1 Focus Podcast with Velman and Hendrik Verrwoerd.